SigmaOS is an amazing browser that everyone in this video should use. And today, I'm here with the co-founder. So, tell us about yourself.
Hey, I'm Mayhad, one of the co-founders of SigmaOS. And to give you a little bit what we're about, we are a browser that has Notion-like workspaces where you can organize your tabs into little workspaces so you can be on top of your stuff. It makes it super easy for you to be fast and better at what you do online.
How did you guys come up with the idea for SigmaOS? Because I personally use it and I love it. It's like such a good idea.
So I was diagnosed with ADHD actually in 2019. And it was at the time when I started using Notion, Superhuman, all these like productivity tools to make sure like I'm distraction free and I really can focus on what I need to do and be on top of everything. And the one tool that I was using the most was a browser. And I'm a developer. I was at that time doing a lot of React. And I was a bit frustrated of like the amount of content switching. I had Safari open, Chrome open, Brave open, and each of them for different contexts. So one was personal, one was work, but then within work you have different stuff like, okay, here's for my deving, here's stuff for my analytics and all that kind of stuff. And at the same time I was going through uni, so I had a bunch of stuff for my thesis, for my courses, all that kind of stuff. I was like, there needs to be a better way. And I started thinking, what if we build a browser? And then I talked to a long friend of mine, Ali and Saurabh, and we were like, hey, crazy idea, let's build a browser. And we started doing that. The rest
Yeah,
is history from that point.
yeah, I totally I'm the same. I have tons of tabs. I used to have tons of tabs open. Like my friends would say, "Why do you have so many tabs open?" And now it's like it looks 10 times better. And I've actually some of my friends they saw me using Sigma OS in school, and so they started using it too. So like
Ooh,
some people in my class use
nice.
it too.
That is
So
quite nice. That's quite nice. We're pretty popular with students actually.
yeah,
Students and founders are the main people who uses us because it's like it makes it easier for them to be faster. For example, one of the main features we have is keyboard shortcuts that are single key. So it makes it easy for you to remember keyboard shortcuts.
yeah.
We show you pages like, task and a to-do list, essentially like vertical, so you can easily see the information you have and go through each of them and mark them as done instead of just closing them when you're done.
You said that most of the people that use Sigma OS are like students and founders. When you started Sigma OS, like was that the people you wanted to target, or was it like someone completely?
It was very different. Always with startups, when you start in one point and slowly navigate and pivot into different directions and focus a lot more. It was interesting because we started with predominantly founders, creators, developers, and we didn't care for students much. We were like, students, because we were also a paid browser, we were like, oh, students wouldn't use us and it might not be for them. Like they're not into super productivity. Students are disorganized anyway. And then we started like building the product more and more and started posting on TikTok, posting on like Twitter, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. And we saw one of the predominant personas that we are getting are students, and they're retaining much, much higher, like 3 times than the others. And they're paying for the product, which was mind blowing. Like we realized like, okay, we're happy to pay for being able to, for example, sync across devices. So if you have a laptop at home for your personal stuff and a laptop at your class for your classes or whatever your setup is, you would use the syncing to have the same tabs set up workspaces across all your devices. But then there's also a lot of students using the free version we have, which limits them to 3 workspaces, but that's enough for them. Just the factor of like them feeling like, oh, I can just focus on being better at what I do versus like I need to be organized or type A person that is super organized. As you said, you yourself weren't inherently an organized person, but SigmaOS makes it easy to be on top and kind of organized.
Yeah, it's like I get distracted easily too. So I would like go into like randomly like go into my other tabs, like start like doing stuff in those tabs. But now it's just like that doesn't happen anymore. So yeah, it's really amazing.
I'm glad. I'm glad.
So who did you guys take inspiration from? Was it Notion or
So when we started, like we wanted to be more like superhuman and like super focused, super organized, everything like that. But then we started slowly, naturally, as we built the product with our users, because that's a big believer we have. We never did waitlist. We never did like, oh, it's the secret thing that nobody can have access to. We always were like, come in, try it out, let us know what you think. Made us slowly gravitate towards more a Notion type browser where now people like call us Notion for browser. students mainly think of us as that because it has kind of a friendly, very slick design versus like a very intense design that is meant for like, oh, it is for productivity and productivity only. It makes it enjoyable to browse and use the internet. So that is kind of the inspiration, and Slack obviously for the workspace style kind of things to separate your context and your focus points.
Right now, it's like it's not a search engine right now. It's like a browser for the search engine. Are you guys planning to soon turn it into a search engine, or
I don't think so. I know the idea of like the Google style of like you have tools for every facet of what everyone uses. What we try to do is integrate really nicely with everything you do. So we had a partnership for a while with U.com, who is this amazing search engine. We basically have custom integration for Notion. So we want to make SigmaOS essentially an operating system that sits between your local device, your Mac OS, and your web, because all apps are web applications anyway. So what we are trying to do is the existing softwares people use, make them a lot better to use on SigmaOS versus on Chrome, Safari, or any other browser.
you mentioned you were meeting a lot of people from YC. Tell us how you got in there. Tell us everything.
For us, when we started doing a bit of fundraising and everything, and one of our investors was like, this kind of idea seems like YC's kind of thing. You should apply. We applied. We didn't expect to get in. I remember we sent our application, didn't hear back for a month, and we're like, oh, it's not gonna happen anyway. Let's focus on the product. And a month in, while I was like moving out of my old flat, as movers were taking stuff away, I was just checking my email, and I saw this email from YC saying update for your application. And I was like, okay, we got rejected. Let me just skim through the emails, find the word unfortunately, and just like be done with it. But then they were like, oh no, it's your application is quite nice. We would like to talk to you. And I was like, what? And then I called my co-founders. I'm like, oh, we need to prep for the interview. And they were like, okay, how many weeks do we have? I'm like, we have 2 days. 2 days to do the application, like remember that what we sent to them, but also like prep for the interview. So for 2 days, we were walking around London and talking to each other, asking the classic YC question, like, what are you building? And we tried to hone in on that every time we asked each other that. And then we jumped on the interview call. It was quite fun, scary a little bit, but quite fun. And then we got a follow-up interview after that. And at the end of it, Gustav, our YC partner, who, for anyone that doesn't know Gustav, he built growth at Airbnb. So very impressive guy. At the end of it, he was like, okay, one last question. After asking us 200 questions at that point, one last question, would you like to do YC? And we're like, of course, yes. We were so excited. And that's where our journey with YC started. We had a bit of a hiccup here and there. To give you context, I'm Iranian, so I cannot have access to US software because of some legal stuff, US export laws and stuff like that. So we had a bit of a hiccup, and I had to get a permanent residency in Paraguay actually to be able to continue being part of YC. So we got kicked out of YC after 2 weeks of being in YC. Then I had to get a Paraguayan permanent residency and then getting back to YC and then just continuing that, which was quite stressful, but also a very exciting feeling and journey essentially.
I can imagine that being like so stressful.
Yeah.
For any people who have a startup that want to get into Y Combinator, what are some tips you offer them?
The biggest tips I have is actually read the resources that are put out by YC. Gary Tan has a lot of incredible YouTube videos. We've actually created a SigmaOS workspace, shared workspace that I can send it to you and you can share it with your audience.
Yeah.
Of like literally videos from Gary Tan, tips from Gary Tan. That to give you context, Gary Tan is the CEO of Y Combinator, of like how to get into YC essentially. And the most important part is for you when you're applying to YC, show that you understand problem that you're trying to solve. They won't be impressed by fancy words of like, oh, we're doing this generative AI to do like this kind of cool thing. They won't be impressed by that. But what they would be impressed by is, hey, we found this problem, and this is the unique insight we have about this problem, and this is why we think we can solve it in this way. And that will pique their interest. The moment you talk about a specific problem that you really understand and you've kind of proven that this is a big enough problem to have a poll, that's when you pique their interest.
The link for that shared workspace will be in the description if you're interested. So let's say, all right, Apple or Google wants to buy SigmaOS.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
That's an interesting question. If they try to acquire us, obviously it depends where we are at, right? At the current stage, we're not that interested in acquisitions. We had already offers for acquisition. I can't go too much in detail into it, but we had offers for acquisition, and even from our main competitors, we had offers, and we decided not to go with it because we are quite excited right now about what we're building, and we want to see how far it goes. Acquisition sometimes is just about the dollar value that you get versus like the opportunity of actually continuing what you're doing. If it was like maybe in a few years when we've done a lot more and we know then this acquisition will help us to take it to the next level, we probably would consider it. But at the current time, not really. It doesn't make sense for us because we're a year and a half in making SigmaOS, and it still feels early days into the journey, very early days. It's still very excitable that we want to be, front in line for everything that's happening.
Yeah, I agree with you. The time you do everything is so important. Like, yeah, you need to time everything correctly and wish for the
you need to wait for the right moment. Right now, we might get very enticing offers, but we're still very excited about everything we can do on our own for making that decision.
I love the name of SigmaOS. I laughed when I saw it, and it's like a very easy to remember name. How do you guys choose the name?
So the reason behind the name, that's an interesting thing. And we're gonna make some videos about why we chose the name. It stands from two parts, Sigma and OS. The Sigma part was kind of a bit of a nerdy reason. We were looking at names, and some of them were very inspirational and very like, oh, what if it was Matt, or what if it was like Aura, or like this kind of cool names that are so inspiring. I was sitting there just like drawing the math function Sigma. So if anyone does math, they know that Sigma is essentially a function that accumulates all different addition functions into one simple place. I really like the icon for Sigma. And then I turned to my co-founders and I was like, what if we say Sigma? And they were like, what do you mean? Like, well, Google is Google. They're a math thing. And Apple is just a fruit. But what about Sigma? And it makes sense for us because we're taking a lot of different places of, the work that you do online, and we put all of them in one place, just like, the Sigma function, the math function that takes like all the different addition functions and puts them very beautifully in one place that is very cohesive and understandable. So that's where the name Sigma came actually from. And then the OS part was, we always thought of this browser as something beyond just a browser. We were inspired by looking at stuff like Chrome OS and Mac OS. And what if it was a new way of computing? What if it was a new computer completely, and it acted like a new operating system? Operating system obviously is the software that sits between your kernel and your, local applications, which makes it the operating system, which makes, all your UI, GUI, and everything work with the internal hardware of your computer. And we thought, okay, what about a layer above that? What about an internet computer, which was a layer, an operating system that bridges your local computer with the internet, a whole new software. And that's why everything we have kind of resonates with this, especially our syncing. Any computer you pick up, it doesn't matter what computer it is. When you log into SigmaOS, you have your personal operating system, your workspaces, your tabs, your history, everything. The amount of times I forgot my laptop at work and I logged into either Ali's computer or my girlfriend's computer or anyone else and be like, I have everything I need. I remember one of our users messaged us and was like so thankful because basically he had to send his computer for repair and then use a different work computer. And he was so happy that you didn't have to worry about like, oh, I need to use Time Machine and like install all my stuff again, yada yada yada. It was like I logged into SigmaOS and my Notion, my Slack, all my apps were already there, and I just continued using that instead of installing so many different local applications. So that's where the second half of the name comes. The OS, which stands for actually operating system. So that's where the name comes from.
That's such a interesting story on how you came up with the name. Like, yeah, it's happened to me so many times. I accidentally like when I use Google, I clicked Command Q so many times, and like so many times I've lost every single time. And I have like tons. I used to like what I used to do is I would save like tons of videos to watch on YouTube, so it'd be like 20 tabs
Yeah.
of YouTube videos, and I always clicked Command Q by accident, and also all of those videos were lost. And
Especially when randomly your Chrome crashes, and sometimes
yeah,
when Chrome crashes, you can't restore your tabs anymore.
yeah,
Sometimes you can. If you close it yourself and it's a normal thing, yes, you can. But sometimes when it crashes, it says, I lost your information. And you're like, oh, fuck, I don't have access to any
yeah.
of my tabs, nothing in the middle of my work. So with SigmaOS, if it crashes, if you close it, if you
It's
lose
still
your
there.
laptop, it's still there.
Yeah, that's amazing. I personally would have never guessed like it has to do with math. Like it would have taken 1,000 tries for me to that the name comes from math. I thought it came
Yeah, a
from
bit of a
like
nerdy thing. Yes.
yeah. I thought it came from like recently like the Sigma movies, like the movies like
Uh,
Sigma male characters. I thought it came from there. I don't know why, but yeah.
it's a trend on TikTok. A lot of
Yeah.
people have thought it's from there, but it's not. It was actually the trend started what about like a few months ago, a year ago.
Yeah, yeah.
The name was there like about 2 years ago. So it came literally from inspiration from Google choosing a math function that makes really sense for them. Their Google stands for a very large number, and their whole thing was we want to basically aggregate all the information in the world and categorize all of it. So huge number of Google. For us, it was like we want to take what is it that takes everything and puts it in a very elegant format in one place called the Sigma function.
Yeah. Like I know not only me, but like probably millions of people like see like get like Stigma videos on like TikTok and stuff like that. And I found SigmaOS from TikTok. So do you think a lot of the new users came from like people accidentally stumbling upon it because of the similarities of the name?
Yeah, probably. Funny enough, on TikTok, our highest viewed contents are our meme contents. Like we do this one content that we've done it 3 times now, and every time it like gets 500,000 views or something. It's the penguin from Madagascar. We do a bunch of like Family Guy memes. We did one, I think, Sigma meme at some point. I didn't do as well as we were hoping, but yeah, like a lot of people there are like, oh, like I love the product, but the name, why is it called this? Is it to do with the trend? And it's on us. We have to clarify, like, no, it
Yeah.
was a coincidence that it ended up with the trend afterwards. But for us, it was a very nerdy reason of like math.
Yeah, you should definitely try doing more like Sigma memes. Sigma memes. I feel like one of them will definitely blow up.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We'll give it a try. We'll give it a try.
Yeah. So, what are some tricks to personalize SigmaOS? Assuming you're the co-founder, so you probably know a little bit more.
Uh, Tricks to personalize it. Definitely use separate profiles. Like I have my personal like stuff that have a whole separate logging, so I can have my different Google or Notion or Netflix, and then I have a separate one for workspaces. So separate profiles are pretty cool. Customization, it's that's an interesting part because my setup might necessarily work for a lot of people. I have a like morning routine one, which I go through every morning. Utilizing the split view is quite good, and using the lazy search. That the actually, if you want to really do it in a way that makes sense for you and have super control over it, first go through your workspaces, set up your workspaces. Like let's say your 3 classes or 4 classes you have, then create one personal one which has like let's say your Spotify, Netflix, all that kind of stuff. Then spend like about 5 minutes renaming all those tabs. Your Spotify to music, your Netflix to Netflix or chill time, and make each of them something that is very memorable for you specifically, and then hit space to open up lazy search. And at that point, you can search by name and jump to it directly to any tab that you want. Like you want to quickly switch your song or search for a different playlist, space, music, you jump to Spotify, and then you can search instead of like clicking or trying to find Spotify. That is one personalization that is key. And if you do it, you're going to be 10x faster than any other browser that you will ever have.
Yeah, lazy search is amazing. I have my setup similar to that. Where do you see SigmaOS in like 10 or 5 years? Or maybe even in a year? Where do you see it?
In 10 years, I think we'll become one of the main browsers everyone uses. It's going to be a generation defining browser where just like how it's insane not to use Notion now, will be insane not to use SigmaOS. In the next 5 years, we're going to well be halfway through that. And we're going to make sure we are on all the different platforms, iOS, iPadOS, Windows, Linux, hopefully. The next year is the most exciting one because the past few months, we started growing massively. So we're quite excited to see where this goes in the next year. The next year, SigmaOS will become a tool that a lot of cool and early adopters will know about. And if you know about it, it's going to become something like, oh, I'm one of the early people that got on the train.
Yeah.
So we're quite excited about where we're going to be in the next year. Our personal growth focus is having it in the hands of like more than 1 million people by next year. So fingers crossed.
Let's hope all of those things happen. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This really means a lot.
Thank you very much for having me.
Before we end, is there anything you want to promote?
Go check SigmaOS and join our community, sigmaos.com/community. You can DM me, Ali, Sora, and the other 2 employees we have, Susie and Alfie. We're a team of 5. We're very friendly. So join us, ask us any questions, SigmaOS or non-SigmaOS related. Happy to help.
Everything will be in the description. Once again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I'll see you
for
next
having me.
episode of the NicoCast.